Greetings, students, and welcome to this special edition of the Professor Travel Domestic Edition. I am your host, The Professor Travel, coming to you from Orange County, California. This is the website, the vlog, and the podcast that you go to in order to learn more about different travel destinations. Hopefully, this will inspire you to discuss more as a community about these different locations. I would love it if you were to travel more and talk to me a little bit about that, to share your experiences, and ultimately to enjoy life more. Now, you can reach me on a variety of different social media platforms, including, of course, my website, which is at theprofessortravel.com. You can reach me over at YouTube and Facebook, both at The Professor Travel. I'm now on TikTok, by the way, for all the kids that are out there, all the millennials. I'm now at The Professor Travel on there. If you're a Instagrammer, you can find me there at _professor_travel. If you're a Twitter, I'm not sure exactly how you would say that. You can find me on Twitter at theprofessortr1. And then, of course, if you're a blogger, you can find me on Blogspot at theprofessortravel.blogspot.com. Today, I have a very good friend of mine, a visiting professor that's coming to us from Missouri. I would like to speak with Jeremy Patterson. Hi, Jeremy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Give me a chance to talk about my, the state I reside in,
which I appreciate. Now, for the benefit of my students, which are my listeners and viewers, can you talk to me a little bit about your credentials, maybe some educational background and some places that you've traveled?
Sure. Well, I have a Bachelor of Arts degree from University of California, Long Beach.
Okay.
It's in liberal studies. So my initial educational background was I learned how to be a teacher.
Very nice.
And then as far as traveling background, I've been working with Wells Fargo for the past 17 years or so, and it gave me an opportunity to live not only in California, where I was born and raised, but I got a chance to transfer out to North Carolina. So I got to see small North Carolina in Winterville, big North Carolina in Raleigh. And most recently, I got to go over to the Midwest and live in Missouri, where I've been for the past 8 years.
Excellent.
So, while I'm there, I love traveling. Most of my travel has been domestic. I've been to 47 of the states.
Wow.
I'm missing Alaska, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So a couple of those are close by. I hope to.
I got two of those on you. I have Mississippi and I have Alaska on you there.
Nice.
So we'll have to have a conversation about that. In fact, later on, for those of us students who are really going to enjoy this, we're going to be doing a follow-up vlog and podcast on different types of parks, national and potentially even state parks in Missouri. So stay tuned on that. But for the most part, today we're going to be discussing your time in Missouri and talking a little bit about the state and its background. So to get started, let's talk a little bit about the history of Missouri. Can you tell us a little bit about like pre-1950s, like information about Missouri? Because I don't know that much about it.
Yeah, well, I had a chance to look some neat facts up. And this is coming from historychannel.com, but Missouri became a state in 1851 as part of the Missouri Compromise. So what that was is you couldn't enter a state into the Union without allowing another state to enter in as part of the Confederacy, which I thought that was kind of interesting. Missouri was also an important transportation hub. So what would happen is a lot of industry would come into Chicago through the Great Lakes, and they would move it down through barges through Missouri, down the Mississippi, and down to the southern states.
Okay.
So Missouri actually invested a lot of their funding and infrastructure to riverboat traffic.
Okay.
Samuel Clements was actually from Missouri. So a lot of the Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn.
For those of my international viewers who are out there, you might know him better as Mark Twain. So,
but that gives you an idea as far as where all the riverboat traffic and kind of how St. Louis was set up. It was a transportation hub for riverboats, which there's still some. That's a lot of the industry today. Is you go over to the river, you see barges going up and down, carrying big old long trains of cargo up and down the river.
Well, it's probably more efficient than like overland transpo.
Yeah. Certainly going with the flow of the river, it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. And then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I got a couple more neat things.
Please, yeah.
So in 1873, Missouri actually opened up the first kindergarten in the U.S.
Oh, wow. That's kind of cool.
And the Dred Scott case.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually first seen prior to it going to the Supreme Court in St. Louis.
Okay. So not the happiest of things, obviously, but there's sometimes when we talk about history, and this is something, students, that you're going to see throughout these conversations, is sometimes um, we'll talk about some great things that have happened in the States, and sometimes we'll talk about memorable historical moments that may not be the happiest of things, but it's something that I think we need to have a conversation about. So
Yeah,
again, thank you for bringing that up.
sure. And on a more lighter note, Lewis and Clark began their trek out west
Hmm.
from the original state capital of St. Charles here. And in Old Town St. Charles, where they still have the cobblestone paved roads and the original brick buildings there, they've actually got a reproduction of the canoe, it's huge. I mean, it's like the length of a tractor trailer. You say canoe, you don't picture
Not
this.
that big.
Not that big, but these things are huge. And it still holds water. They bring it out and float it down the river every now and then.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's impressive.
And then the last older history, pre-1950s, is 1904. St. Louis held the World's Fair here,
Mm-hmm.
and the grounds Forest Park is still there and still being used. But that's also the World's Fair where the ice cream cone was invented.
Nice. And I hear that was by accident too.
Yes.
It was because someone needed something to put the ice cream in, and this waffle
The
maker
waffles worked.
Yep, the waffles were just, hey, well, this may work. Let's just wrap it in the cone. One other thing I want to add to that, of course, is that in terms of the mail service and postal service, a start of that started in Missouri with the Pony Express, starting in that area and moving its way westward. So that was definitely pre-1950s stuff. But in terms of from 1950s to the present, what other thoughts do you have on that?
So probably the most famous piece of history we have is the Gateway Arch. It's probably what we're most known for. And that was built in 1965. It was kind of an engineering marvel of how they built it. It's all stainless steel. And they call it the Gateway Arch because it connected the east half of the country with the west half of the country. And you can actually go up in the arch. I've done it exactly one time. I'm not a fan of heights.
I'm there with you.
And when you go up, you go on a kind of it's not an elevator, it's an inclinator. So you go up, imagine a Ferris wheel where you go up like 5 feet and then the car sways a bit. Then you go up another 5 feet and the car sways a bit. And they got they squeeze about 6-8 people in the cabin size of like a VW Beetle. So you're all kind of crammed in there and swaying a bit. And then you get to the top and they've got windows. One window lets you look out over the Mississippi River. On the other side, you get a nice view of Cardinal Stadium. So if there's a Cardinals game going on, you can kind of watch the game from on top of the arch. And then you go down the other side.
Very cool.
So it's neat to do once. For me, only once.
Just to say you've done it.
Right.
Awesome.
It's also home of the Budweiser Brewery.
Yes.
So, yeah, you can take a really cool brewery tour there. They'll tell you all about the history of Budweiser, how they got their ingredients, and why. It's kind of a neat historical tour. Missouri is also home to the Joplin tornado.
Yeah.
A big tornado that came in and did a bunch of damage.
Was that Cat 5?
Back then. I don't know, to be honest.
I think it was probably
it was
Cat 5. It's
devastating.
one of the largest tornadoes ever known.
Yeah. And then most recently, a couple years ago, we were home to the Ferguson riots.
Yeah.
So that was not a fun time, but like you said, it's still an important moment of history.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate you bringing it up. So in terms of the geography of the area, I put up a little map here for us to kind of guide ourselves with, because there's definitely a large portion, and again, just maybe because it's the television show that's of recent, with the Ozarks, there's a huge amount of the state that are covered with like Ozark Highland area and stuff like that. But what are the adjoining states to Missouri?
Okay, so yeah, we are a Midwest, kind of middle of the country state. To the north of us, we have kind of Iowa and Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
To the east of us, we have Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee.
Okay.
We have Oklahoma and Arkansas to the south, and we have Kansas to the west.
So you have a ton of areas that are surrounding you.
Yeah. We also have 2 major rivers that come in and meet right at St. Louis. The Mississippi and the Missouri kind of join right at St. Louis. to the
Nice.
confluence, and that causes some interesting effects we'll talk about later. Maybe.
Absolutely. I was going to say, are there any mountainous regions in your area? I know there's a number of state parks, but I wasn't sure if there were a lot of mountains in your area.
There's not a whole lot of mountains. I mean, we do have the Ozark Mountains kind of down to the south, but I would not say as far as mountain ranges, no.
It's mostly plains the whole way
Mostly
through.
plains, forest, yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, in terms of weather, obviously, I live in California. We don't get a lot of changes in the weather. We don't get our we don't get our winters. We don't get our autumns so much because again, it's all pine trees out here, palm trees, whatever. But over there, you guys have a nice changing of the seasons. And
Oh yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we get to see all 4 seasons where we're at. So I think it's the winters are somewhat mild, and I'll define mild as it does get cold. You're looking at maybe 30 degrees plus or minus 10.
Yeah.
With a good wind, I've seen it once where we've gotten into negative numbers.
Oh wow.
But you know what? With all the cold, we really don't get any snow or ice. We might get a few snow days here or there, but it's very rare that things shut down due to snow. We might get maybe half an inch, maybe an inch.
Do the rivers ever freeze over or no?
No, they're fast enough moving that if it freezes, it just moves on down the road.
Okay.
So the lakes will definitely freeze over, but I don't know that I've known anyone brave enough to trust them to go like skating on them or anything like that.
No. And like you may mention,
I'm from Southern California, so I don't trust it at all. So I keep my kids and myself away from them.
point and case. Now, in terms of extreme weather, though, we already spoke a little bit about the tornado, frequency that you guys have there. Obviously, Jovelin was like the biggest of them, but I mean, in terms of other natural disasters or anything that happens, what other things come to mind?
So, like as far as natural disasters go, we pretty much have 3 that we need to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
We have thunderstorms, we have tornadoes, and we have flooding. So if you get a lot of rain, the problem with having the 2 big rivers right by you is when it rains a lot, especially upriver, all that comes downriver and it'll flood. Yeah. So you might see bad flooding, especially like St. Charles, where I was talking about earlier. The water in the rivers have come all the way up to the actual city. So people do a really good job at getting together. They'll go down there, they'll start sandbagging and doing as much as they can to, protect the buildings and stuff. It doesn't happen super often, but I've seen it happen a couple times since I've been here. Tornadoes, I've had a chance to be in 2.5 of them, and I'll say 2.5.
No, talk to us about that first one, because I thought it was a humorous story. Please go ahead.
So when I first got to St. Louis, my office put the Southern California boy in charge of office safety and natural disaster safety. And so one day we were at the office and I heard the tornado siren going off. Mm-hmm. So I did what I thought best and I evacuated the office, including my boss, who happened to be on a conference call. And it wasn't until after we had everybody out of the building and, to safety, that they bothered to tell me, oh no, on the first Monday of every month, they just do a test siren. And
Great to know.
Yeah, nobody left me in charge of tornado warnings ever again.
Well, good for you on that. But they're not like super frequent, it sounds like.
They're not super frequent. We'll get a couple sirens a year, maybe. Okay. But just because the siren goes off doesn't mean that there's a tornado touching down. It just means that they've seen the funnel cloud hit the ground somewhere near you.
Okay.
So, I mean, when the siren goes off, you go to the lowest level of your house and you kind of hunker down until it's safe to come out, till the sirens go off.
Do most places there have basements because of that?
Most houses I've been to and have been around have all had basements.
Okay.
I'm sitting in my basement right now. And, at the office, we would go and hunker down in the parking structure. And we did have to actually, for real, evacuate the office one time for a tornado.
Okay.
And the most difficult part was keeping everybody in the parking structure until, everyone said it was safe to leave. But
hurting cats.
Yeah, even the tornadoes that have touched down, they've ripped the roofs off of buildings, but it's not like Wizard of Oz type levels. No one's house got picked up and taken to Oz or anything like that.
Okay, good. I'm always a little, okay. So here in California, like our biggest issues are like fires, mudslides occasionally, and then of course earthquakes. But in all my life here, I've experienced a couple of tremors that have been enough to wake me up, but that's really it. Nothing really crazy. I have never experienced a tornado. I've come close to experiencing a tornado, but never actually experienced a full-blown tornado. So that, I think, the concept of it freaks me out.
Oh yeah, it certainly did for us too the first time we had to go through it.
Yeah.
One other interesting thing I'll say about St. Louis, because those two rivers meet at the confluence, it makes some kind of weird pressure system buildup. So like if there's a big storm, tropical storm coming up from the south or coming in off the Rockies, for whatever reason, it hits that confluence bubble and it either goes around us to the north or around us to the south.
It doesn't hit you directly.
It tends to miss. It's like we got a little force shield over the over St. Louis.
Good for you guys. Have superpowers. That's impressive. Right. So let's talk about the culture of the area. Now, when I think of culture, one of the first things I think about is the generalized religion in the area. Do you have any predominant religions that are pronounced in the Missouri area?
Yes. Actually, St. Louis is mostly Protestant, with Baptist being the largest by far.
Okay.
There's also a large Catholic population. In fact, Pope John Paul II came to visit one of the churches in downtown St. Louis, and they've got a little, for lack of a better term, shrine/museum set up.
Nice.
And it's a neat church to visit because they've got all kinds of just gorgeous stained glass windows and artwork done inside of it. There's also a decent-sized Jewish community, Eastern, Muslim, and a couple of Unitarian Universalist churches.
Okay, cool. Now, what about the art in your community? Is there like any famous art? I mean, obviously, Mark Twain being a writer, that on its own is a huge cultural adaptation. But what in terms of like any art or anything that may come up in your community that might be of note?
So B.B. King's actually from here. So there is a huge blues scene and jazz scene. In fact, B.B. King has his jazz club in downtown St. Louis.
Nice.
So, and that's a fantastic place for that. We have an outdoor amphitheater called the Muni that's in that forest park where the World's Fair was, and they do free productions throughout the summer for it.
Okay.
So they'll do shows like Footloose, Kinky Boots, Matilda, all kinds of like big.
All great shows, by the way.
Yeah. So we've got Branson, which is in southwestern Missouri, which, according to Homer Simpson, is Las Vegas if Ned Flanders had built it. But it's actually known for tame family fun. Okay. So there's a lot of neat stuff there. Dolly Parton has a amusement park there called Silver Dollar City. It's kind of like Dollywood, just a little farther west.
Okay.
So music, I talked about B.B. King and jazz.
Yeah.
There's tons of museums and art installations, all free to the public. We've got zoos that's free to the public. It's all in that Forest Park area.
Wonderful.
That's one of the cool things I think about St. Louis is there's all this art and science and culture that's available for anyone just to go in and enjoy.
Excellent. Now, in terms of language, though, now there's not, like, everybody there speaks English for the most part. I think there's not any predominant like French or Spanish that is regularly spoken, but there are a couple of dialects that you might pick up a little bit, or twangs at least, as you get closer to the southern area, correct?
Yeah, definitely. As far as spoken language is concerned, everyone speaks English. As you do go closer to the south, you will pick up a little bit of a southern twang. And I'm not sure if all your listeners know this, but some of them probably have, that our state is pronounced two different ways depending on where you're at.
Yes.
In the northern part of the state, most of the people will call it Missouri.
Yes.
If you go farther to the south, you tend to hear more of a Missouri coming from it. So it's a little bit of a regional dialect. Near as I can figure, as you go farther south, that's where you pick that up.
Okay, cool.
But as far as language, you also see a huge French influence here. So probably because it was originally a French colony, French territory. So you'll see like Saint Genevieve. My son and I stayed at a state park. It was Saint Francois on paper, although everyone pronounces it just Saint Francis. There's a lot of clear French influence going on around here.
Excellent. Now, one of my favorite topics, of course, food. Oh my gosh.
Oh yes.
Oh, talk to me about food in St. Louis and in general in Missouri.
All right. So the first thing, you talk to someone who's from St. Louis and they find out you're not there, they're going to tell you got to eat 3 things. All right. You got to have St. Louis style pizza, and I'll go into more of that later.
All right.
You got to have ravioli. You got to have their
specifically baked ravioli.
Baked ravioli, yes. Thank you. And you got to have a gooey butter cake.
Butter cake. Okay.
Baked ravioli is to die for. It is like sin in square form. And the gooey butter cake it's a cake, but it's got the thickness and consistency of a brownie.
So it's almost like a brownie that's like mega sized.
Yeah, they're like that thick and about 9 inches square.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very, very dense. A little piece will do you. And they're not quite cooked in the middle, so that's where the gooey part comes from. But they are good.
Very rich food.
Yeah. And then the St. Louis style.
The pizza, yeah.
Yeah. So I promised I'd come back to that. So it's a thin cracker crust pizza. And then it's a circular pizza, but they don't cut it in triangles like most people. They cut it up into little squares. So there's got to be like in your normal 12-inch pizza, there's got to be like 30 little squares worth of pizza that you eat there. It makes going for a middle piece a little messy.
But you were specifically talking to me before also about the cheese content as well.
So St. Louis has this cheese, and I use the phrase cheese loosely, called Provel. And the people here they go nuts for it. They think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and they probably put it on their sliced bread. For me, it's more like eating molten plastic. I'm not a fan. But they put it on everything, and they swear by it.
But, it's probably like if we were to go to, like, out of the country to either Australia or to England and go and have, like, either Vegemite or Marmite or whatever it's called. Some people just love the taste of it. Like, I know, like, here in the States, we like peanut butter. That's a thing for us. Yeah. You take that outside the States, people either love it or they hate it. They absolutely hate. Like, there's no middle ground to it. It's like either love or hate. And so I don't know why that is. So it's probably one of those local things that people have had for many years, and it's just very, this tastes like home to them. And so it's like kind of one of those things. So, but of course, where would we be without like barbecue, of course,
exactly. And that's one of the other things St. Louis is known for is their barbecue. It is tomato based, as opposed to like North Carolina, which is a vinegar based barbecue and a rub and a smoke. Yeah. And it is fantastic. Some of the best known places, if you're in downtown St. Louis, get there early, but go to Pappy's Barbecue. It's to die for. He only makes as much barbecue as he feels like on a given day, which is why I say get there early, because when he runs out, he closes shop and he doesn't come back till tomorrow.
Well, the demand is quite there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's never got to have to worry about rent. So
yeah. They also have, which is a little known, it's one of my favorite places to go to, is a Giona's Deli, and it's a little Italian shop. And what they're known for is their hot salami sandwiches. So they take the salami and they heat it up, like almost like boil it kind of. And it just tenderizes the meat. It's very flavorful, very, very good. So if you're in downtown St. Louis, you can't get into Pappy's, I definitely hit up Giona's to get their hot salami sandwiches.
That is one of the things I find, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've also been in North Carolina as well, and you've lived there for a while. Like, traveling throughout the States is a food culture experience, because it's one of those things where, regardless of politics, regardless of religion, regardless of anything, you have a great time having food no matter where you go. It kind of transcends everything. And so in terms of understanding like where people are at or where the culture is, I think food is one of those equalizers that kind of goes over everything, and people have a wonderful respect for.
Definitely.
But I mean, and in terms of beverages, I mean, obviously Budweiser's been there for a billion years.
Budweiser's huge. Non-alcoholic beverages. And I didn't know this going in, but St. Louis has the best root beer I have ever had. You can only get it in St. Louis. It's called Fitz's Root Beer. And I'm not sure what they put into this root beer, but I've had like A&W. I've had many, many different kinds of root beer, and they all kind of taste the same. But Fitz's is just like 2 notches above. It goes to 11.
On the root beer scale, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. But aside from Budweiser, if you're into beers, we have a couple local breweries.
Mm-hmm.
We have Schlafly, which specializes in like a white Belgian ale, kind of like a Blue Moon.
Okay, nice.
There's Boulevard.
I like Hefeweizen, so that's actually pretty good.
Oh yeah. Same with Boulevard Brewery. They specialize in an unfiltered beer. So if you're going to get a bottle of theirs, make sure you leave about, I don't know, quarter of an inch on the bottom undrunk, because that's where all the sediment and stuff is going to settle to and pour it.
Interesting. Okay.
And then another one of my favorites is by Urban Chestnut Brewery, and they have a German beer called a Zwickel.
Zwickel?
Zwickel. Kind of sounds like pickle, but different. But it's a light beer. It's got a lot of nice flavor. You can drink it kind of all day. It's a German Bavarian style lager.
So I like it.
It is dang tasty.
Nice. Awesome. Very, very good. Now, in terms of recreation and sports in the area, now, obviously, we stole the Rams back from you. Although, with all due respect, it was our team first, coming from Southern California. They went over to St. Louis, and then they came back. But
to be fair, we couldn't get them to win when they were over here anyway. So,
all right, fine, that's fine. Whatever. We'll take you on that, because we couldn't get them to win the first time they were over here, anyways, either. At least not when I was growing up. Yeah. And then, but you guys have the Cardinals as well in terms of baseball, and that's a pretty big thing out there.
Oh my gosh, I have never seen an area react more strongly to a baseball team than I have in St. Louis. Like, and I say this, and there's very little exaggeration going on. When the Cardinals are in the playoffs, the city shuts down. I mean, you can almost see tumbleweeds going down the freeway. There's just that's all anyone does is watch and pay attention to the Cardinals. The same thing with the hockey team, the Blues. When they're in the run for the Stanley Cup, same thing, that the city just shuts down.
Nice.
Now on the west half of the state, people shift away from the Cardinals. They go more to the
Kansas
Royals.
City Chiefs and the Royals and stuff like that. Yeah, that makes more sense.
And we just picked up a Major League Soccer team, the St. Louis City Soccer Club, which is a brand new expansion team. It's actually owned by all women, which is the only MLS team that is owned by all women.
Oh, interesting.
And it's just starting up, so they haven't even played a game yet. They just announced.
Oh, I was going to say, how do they compare to the Galaxy?
That long ago.
Like, because you lived here for a while, you know about the Galaxy. How would you say they compare? But if they haven't started, so it's like.
Right. I couldn't tell you, but I got to say I like the Galaxy more, only because that's the team I kind of grew up on. The team they had back there. So
there you go. In terms of recreation, though, you guys have a couple of amusement parks and obviously a lot of state parks, too.
So we do. That's tons of state parks. Actually, this is something my family likes to do, is we have a state passport.
Yes.
And it's got just pages and pages of the different state parks. And every time you go to one, you can go in and get it stamped.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're about 3/4 of the way through this book here. And we'll just, on a weekend, we'll go, oh, let's flip open the book and go check it out.
It's a kind of cool collectible thing, but it's also a great thing to do with the family.
Yeah. Like in a couple of weeks, we're going to a state park that has a castle on it.
Really?
Yeah. It's like,
okay, I'm going to wait to see the pictures on that, because that's going to be really cool.
Oh, yeah. But one thing you have to do in St. Louis, and I've only seen something like this done in St. Louis, and I would say this is fun for the whole family, is the City Museum. Now, imagine, the kids' play areas at McDonald's with the tubes and the ball pits and the slides and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
This is a 3-story one of those.
Oh, wow.
And it's for adults. Kids will disappear in like this little 2-foot hole in the ground and pop up 50 yards down, coming out of a whale's mouth.
Wow.
They're literally climbing through the ceilings. They've got adult ball pits full of dodgeballs with basketballs in there. They've got a bar. They've got a origami station where you can make that. They've got a circus in there. They've got all kinds of half pipes and skateboard things that you have to do on foot. They won't let you bring skateboards in there. They have an airplane on the roof, and you can climb out through these little rebar cages over nothing. So you look down, there's just 3 stories and then concrete.
Oh, good.
And you can climb out, climb into the cockpit of the airplane, which is at an angle like this, also looking down over the ground. And then go about your business. They've got a bus on the roof. They've got a Ferris wheel on the roof that you can go up. They have a 10-story slide you can go down. I mean,
No, that you can go down. I'm a little afraid of heights, so I don't know that I would want to do it down a 10-story.
The 10-story slide is fine, except it's on those little like cargo rollers, except that I don't slide down the slides. So I scoot, and one scoot gets me about 10 feet, and then I got to scoot again. So the 10-story slide isn't that much fun for me. My wife, my kids, they love it. They'll go down that thing multiple times.
Very nice.
But definitely hit up the City Museum. It is so much fun.
And
when you go in, they give you a wristband.
Okay.
And they make you put the parent's cell phone number on that for when you lose your kid. Okay. Not if.
So it's just when it happens. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because they will go, they just fit somewhere that no adult human can fit. And then they pop out somewhere else. So I will say, if you do go there, make a meeting place and then just check back at the meeting place every 30 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
But that is so much fun. We have a couple of amusement parks. We have Silver Dollar City in the west in Branson. We have a Six Flags over in St. Louis. Yep. We got a brand new aquarium and this giant Ferris wheel that's in downtown.
Oh, nice.
We have the Del Mar Loop, that's where BB King's nightclub is. That's where the Fitz's root beer factory is.
Oh, nice.
They have a scale model of the solar system as you're walking the loop. So you start at like Mercury, and then you go down a few steps, and there's Venus, and then, it gets farther and farther away. So you hit Pluto by the time you hit the end of the loop. They also have the St. Louis Walk of Fame there. So like Harold Ramis has a star. BB King has a star. There's a lot of sports people that have a star there.
Very cool.
A lot of ball players that have a star there. Forest Park that I talked about, that's where the State World Fair was. So that's home to tons of free art museums, science museums, zoos, all kinds of things that's just free to do.
And there is a state fair that is in the general area that's there, right? Or no?
No, not that I've
run into. Maybe I'm mistaken. I apologize.
At Forest Park.
Okay.
But they will bring in an ice rink in winter. So they'll freeze up a section of it. It's not a lake. They just make a man-made ice rink for outdoor skating.
That's great.
They've got tons of state parks. I'm going to mention a couple of them that you just really ought to go to if you're here.
Please.
And I'll tell you what. They've got Johnston Shut-ins, which is down in southern Missouri.
Okay.
And what it is it's like a giant creek/water park, natural water park. So we walking down through this creek, and then it'll go waist deep, and you can kind of swim through some, and then you'll take a couple steps, jump off a little waterfall, and you'll land in like 10 feet deep of water. It's a lot of fun. It's a little harrowing with little kids. We took our kids there not realizing that the depth can vary so much.
Oh, wow.
And me and my 6-year-old, we went down a waterfall, and we landed in like 8 feet of water. Well, my kid couldn't swim. Oh. And I wasn't expecting an 8-foot pool, so I had to haul him up and swim over and push his little butt up on a rock and then get myself out to get out. But don't let that dissuade you. There's rope swings and stuff that you can swing into the water, and it's so much fun.
Awesome. Very cool.
They also have Elephant Rocks, which is a lot of fun. It's a bunch of natural rock formations, and you can boulder there. You can climb up there. There's great sights, great views from the top.
Good hiking?
Yes, definitely.
Excellent.
There's Grant's Farm, which is owned by Anheuser-Busch. And I want to mention this because it's another free zoo.
Okay.
But they've got free Budweiser samples throughout the zoo. They've got a couple tents. You just walk up and they
case.
Yeah. You walk in, you walk to this little tent, they hand you a beer. It's great. They don't charge you. Here's a beer.
I wish that happened everywhere.
Yeah. You get to the end of the zoo, and they have a little German villa there where you can get traditional German Bavarian food and free beer.
That's so awesome.
So it's pretty cool. Branson, of course, has family-friendly shows, tons of shows there. Also, there's this restaurant called Lambert's, which is home of the Throne Roll. So it's a restaurant.
I'm sorry, the Throne Roll?
Throne Roll, yeah.
What is that?
So imagine you and I are sitting at a restaurant. We're at a table across from each other.
Okay.
You have a hankering for a roll, right?
Okay.
You put your hand up, roll.
Throw a throne, like they literally throw a roll to you.
They chuck rolls at you.
Okay.
You will be pelted by pastries.
A toast.
Yes.
Very
and
cool.
if they miss, they are really quick with the second throw. So.
Okay. You're like, I am not the best catcher. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Very funny. In terms of state holidays, I guess the only thing you would have there is like when the sports teams are playing.
Yeah, they really don't have any official state holidays, but like I said, this is the only town that literally shuts down for Cardinals playoffs and Blues playoffs.
Well,
I have never seen this happen before. The only other thing that I could come close to equating to a holiday, and this doesn't necessarily apply, but I would say deer hunting season and turkey hunting season.
Makes
Hunting
sense.
is really big here. A lot of people will go out and hunt deer, hunt turkey, hunt duck, and then they'll eat it.
Well, especially if you're getting towards the winter months, I imagine they're probably like storing up for that. So that makes perfect sense. In terms of the population, I have a little bit of a topography map here, or population map. We can see from this map that the population centers are on either side of the state, with St. Louis being on one side and Kansas City being on the other side. The other red areas, I think, are pretty much college towns. But the population, like, how big is the population of Missouri in general?
So I pulled up the latest census data. I think it was like 2016.
Okay.
And we had 6.1 million people, and it's sparsely populated.
Yeah.
So you can see to the east, the big red blob is St. Louis. To the west is Kansas City. The biggest blob kind of to the southwestish, that's Branson.
And then Columbia, I think, is a little bit higher in the middle.
Columbia is kind of the yellowish green red blob is Columbia. And that's a college town. That's where Mizzou is. There's also a college in Springfield, which is probably another one of the dots on there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But you would say for the most part, I mean, as we can obviously see, it's a lot of urban, or I'm sorry, a lot of rural, actually, and probably because of the huge centers of the Ozarks and a lot of the southern area as well.
Yeah, about 30% of the population is all in farming.
Yeah. So. Any specific farming specializations? Like when we think about like Florida, it's usually something like oranges, and California, it's the wine industry. Any specific thing that is gravitated towards Missouri?
There are a lot of wineries here in the area, but not that I'm aware of.
Is
corn
hops,
would be my biggest guess.
Is hops something? Because I know that Budweiser's a big thing out there.
I don't know, to be honest. I see a lot of corn growing. That's probably the biggest crop that I can recognize.
Okay. Doesn't surprise me that being out in the, in that area. Let's talk about the economy in general, though. I mean, obviously, Enterprise Holdings is huge. Their corporate offices are there, and Edward Jones is really massive. You had a couple that were not on here, though. Can you talk about some of the other businesses that you know about?
Federal Reserve Bank has a huge office downtown. Equifax has a huge office downtown. They're pretty big here.
But you were saying in general, like a lot of the banks that we see on the West Coast, like Bank of America and Wells Fargo, and
they're not out here at all.
Yeah, it's all a lot of credit unions, it seems.
Yeah, most people here, they do their banking with credit unions or local banks.
Awesome.
I think Wells Fargo has exactly 2 branches in Missouri.
In the entire state of Missouri.
In the entire state of Missouri.
That's crazy for me. I mean, considering they're populated almost every other place here,
Exactly.
So that is insightful in terms of that piece. What about as far as like any federal agencies that are really super huge in the area?
The only thing that comes to mind, because we don't really have any military installations or anything like that, not in Missouri. We have one right across the river in Illinois. There's an Air Force base.
Yeah.
But the Geospatial Institute, that's in Missouri.
Okay. Very cool. In terms of travel and transportation, you have more familiarity with the travel corridors and the highways in the area. Like, how is that set up?
We have a few different interstates and highways, especially around St. Louis, to get around. They make kind of a loop, and you can get around by using either of the 2 highways to get around there. Okay. We do have a couple of major airports in Missouri, one on the east, one on the west. St. Louis has Lambert International Airport for St. Louis. Okay. Kansas City also has a major airport there. We have trains. So Amtrak has a couple different rail lines. One is a fairly famous one that goes from Chicago down to, I think it's San Antonio, Texas. It's got a special name called like the Indian Chief or something like that, where you get sleeper cars and butler service and stuff like that if you go on that. There's also one that goes east to west and connects St. Louis to Kansas City.
Speaking of Kansas City, I know I was going to mention this before and I totally forgot about it. There's 2 Kansas Cities. There's Kansas City in Missouri and Kansas City in Kansas. What's the story there? Do you know?
So, honestly, it's a really simple story. Okay. The city's in both states.
So you have one city in 2 states.
Yeah, the city is literally bisecting the state line. Or is bisected by the state line. So half the city's in Missouri, half the city's in Kansas. So you have Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, and
Do they have two mayors or just one mayor? Do you know?
that I don't know.
That's
I
an
don't
interesting
know.
question. I'm going to need to. I'm going to need to do a little
Yeah.
research on that.
I'll have to
So,
look that up.
and we already talked a little bit about the tourism in your state. There's so many different things to see.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the comparative museums and state parks. Now, the government in your state, you are in a very red state.
We are in a very red state.
Very, very red state, and that's
So
both for federal as well as state
local,
politics.
federal,
Correct?
state, all of that is we're fairly red.
Okay, cool. Then, in terms of resources, like what's your state best known for in terms of the different resources? Like what's
So
the mine there and stuff?
as far as natural resources, the biggest ones we have for natural resources, we're known for lead mining and limestone mining.
Okay.
So limestone for making concrete, lead for making lead.
Or lead-based byproducts, or whatever the case may be, pewter,
But
whatever the
other
case.
things that we're known for, of course, the Budweiser beer, St. Louis ribs are really famous.
Pony
The
Express,
Arc, of course, Pony
yeah,
Express.
yeah. So yeah,
So
a lot of different things, but I mean, the mining is primarily what a lot of people are there for. So
definitely down in the South, that's a huge part of what people do.
yeah, and in terms of education in your area, there are a few colleges that are pretty sizable, and we already mentioned a couple, like Mizzou, and
Yeah.
is one.
Mizzou is probably the most popular here. Tons of Mizzou. There's also Washington University, or WashU, that's in St. Louis.
Okay.
There's SLU, which is St. Louis University. There's also the Billikens, which is little happy dancy elephants. That's their mascot.
I'm not really
that I see
familiar with
everywhere.
them, but I'm told that there's a lot of stuff that goes on there for them. So great. And then in terms of the literacy rate, now you did a little research on this.
Yeah, this one was a little surprising. I got this from our last Census Bureau, and the literacy rate came in at 22.11%, which seems really low to me. It might just be where I'm living, and I'm seeing it through maybe rose-colored glasses. But
Possibly.
even in my travels throughout the states, I'm a talker, and the people here are so friendly, and so you just walk up to them, start up a conversation, and learn their life story. And that's one of the things that I have a lot of fun with, is just learning those stories from people.
Yeah.
But none of them seem like, because you think Ozarks, you think hillbilly, right? Just from stories and stuff. But no one comes across as hillbilly. They all seem.
It could just be one of those things, and let me interject for just a second, where a majority of the educational funds for the state are being distributed through the urban communities and less to the rural communities. And so when you have, say, for example, a higher African American population that might be in the more rural communities, this is, of course, a byproduct of the systemic racism and the things that we often see where they're underfunded in the educational sector. It's really unfortunate when stuff like that happens, because that leads to the challenges that are prominent throughout, and a lot of the things we're seeing right now in terms of why people are speaking up and why they're having those issues right now. So
Definitely. And there is, I will say, there is racial tensions going on in the area.
Yeah.
The whole Black Lives Matter movement is, a real hot button topic here. I mentioned the Ferguson riots earlier, which was a racial riot where they actually had lines of people going across the interstate, shutting down like 8-lane highways.
You were there when that happened, right?
I was both in Ferguson for the Ferguson riots, and I was in California for the LA.
What is it with you?
Well, apparently I'm a riot magnet. I don't know.
I guess so.
But
I'm sensing something here.
It was a little scary, but everything seemed fairly peaceable where we were at. We did evacuate our office early to make sure everyone got home safe. The protesters would say, okay, we're going to be protesting at such and such time. So we made sure all of our team members were home well before such and such time.
Good. I'm glad your company made sure of that, and that was important. So that's really, really important. And thank you so much for sharing that. Can we talk really quick about health in your community? Because you have a unique situation in yours.
This is kind of neat. I've never been in this situation before, but we have two big hospital groups. We have Mercy Medical, which is a Catholic-based hospital foundation. And I say Catholic-based, it had its roots in Catholicism.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of Catholic iconography in the hospital. They certainly won't turn you away if you're not Catholic, but it's a Catholic hospital.
Yeah.
The other big hospital chain in the area is Barnes Jewish Hospital.
Mhm.
And, like the name implies, it's a Jewish-based hospital. And it
Yeah.
actually did stem out of a religious divide. So at one point in time when they were first founded, you had to be Catholic to go to Mercy. You had to be Jewish to go to Barnes.
Mhm.
That's no longer the case. They'll take anybody.
Okay.
But Barnes, we actually use both hospitals. Barnes Jewish is one of the founding hospital groups in charge of research for a genetic disorder, Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, which one of my sons have.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fortunate; they're the forefront of the research. So we have genetics appointments once a year with my son to check up and make sure everything's doing well. And he's part of the research study to see if what they can do to make sure fewer kids have this.
Awesome.
We used to live in North Carolina, and the second biggest research center is actually at Duke Medical, which was only about 15 minutes away. So we got very lucky as far as that's concerned.
That is fantastic that you guys had that opportunity, and good for your son though, because that's really great to be able to be close to those facilities. So awesome, and awesome for you and your family on that. What in terms of communication have you learned just in your area? I mean, there's probably not a lot, but I mean,
no, it seems like a fairly typical area. I mean, we've got internet everywhere, even down in the rural areas. I've never really not had access to internet, cable TV, whether it's by digital satellite or antenna. Cell service works everywhere except for the Scout properties, but I'm told that's by design. They really don't want kids attached to electronic devices out there. But aside from that, there's no real dead spots or anything like that. We have, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, all of them work just fine here.
Wonderful. And then finally, of course, safety and security. That's always a hot button issue, especially when we talk about things like the Ferguson riots and stuff like that. But I feel like whenever you go into major cities, they're going to always be the safe places, and they're going to be the places that you kind of have to shy away from.
And we definitely have that here. And there are clear lines of, I guess I'll use the phrase financial demarcation.
Yeah.
You can see, and they're intermixed. So you could go from good part of town to not nice part of town, and then a couple blocks later, good part of town. In fact, one of the more interesting places you can eat is in the bad part of town. It's Crown Candy. They're home of the 1 pound bacon BLT. So BLT with 1 pound of bacon.
Sounds like it's clogged my arteries.
Oh yeah, but it's fantastic. But yeah, there are those clearly places you don't want to go to after night. In fact, if you remember the movie National Lampoon's Vacation, there's a scene where they go to St. Louis, and it's actually East St. Louis, which is in Illinois. There's a scene where they're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you hear Clark or Chevy Chase's character go, "All right, lock your doors, windows up." And then they zoom back, and in the 15 seconds it took them to roll up the windows and lock the doors, their car was completely stripped. No wheels, it's up on blocks, there's no bumpers. It's not that bad, but again, I've been to East St. Louis during the day. I was perfectly fine. At night, you probably don't want to go there. And there are other areas you probably just best avoid it at night. But walking around downtown St. Louis, I've been perfectly fine, safe. I haven't felt threatened or anything.
Do you guys have something like food delivery services that if maybe you wanted to order something later on, you could get it delivered to you? Or
oh yeah, we have Uber Eats, and there's a couple different ones. But as far as major crimes, because I know you had asked me about that.
Yeah,
I would say our biggest crime is probably gun violence. And I'll say we also have the most liberal gun laws that I've experienced.
Okay.
So, for example, and I'll give you an example here. You don't really need a permit to conceal carry.
Yeah.
If you want to carry a gun hidden on your body somewhere, go for it. And the thought is, and this is just my opinion, it's kind of a Old West mentality, is if there's a bad guy out there looking to do something bad, I'm going to get him before he gets me.
Yeah.
But of course, that leads to a bunch of gun violence.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with different positions on gun control, and so that could be. And I know you've spoken about it. I know your wife also speaks about it as well too. It's just sometimes there's there's a variety of different conversations to have. Like, for example, even me and my husband, we disagree on the matter because he comes from a background where his family did a lot of hunting.
Mhm.
And from my perspective, I have very strong opinions about gun violence. And so my mind goes into that area. But yeah, it's just going to be one of those things I think we just need to have a more frank conversation about, and what
I
types
agree.
of firearms are appropriate and what ones maybe are a little bit more extreme. In
Right.
terms of terrorism, though, you guys haven't really had any foreign terrorism threats of any sort there. I
No,
mean,
not at all.
yeah, just a little bit of domestic challenges
That
for
would be our
one.
biggest, like I said, gun violence would be the thing. A couple years ago, we had someone go to a community center and pull out a gun and start shooting up some
Yeah,
people. And it made for an argument both for and against gun control, because the reason the gunman was stopped is one of the people working out at that community center had a concealed weapon. So as soon as he heard gunfire, they went to their locker, pulled out their weapon, and shot the shooter. So there was a case made, yes, we need to have more strict gun control laws, because clearly someone shouldn't be allowed to just walk into a place and start shooting up the joint. And no, the gun laws are fine, because if that guy didn't have a gun, way more people would have been shot and injured and killed.
it's an interesting argument that I think is probably going to go on for some time in
I
reference to
agree.
that. So, well, to kind of wrap us up, sell me really quick on, like, let's say example, I say I'm thinking about going to Missouri. In a quick, like, elevator speech here, just sell me Missouri in a moment, STOTUS.
Okay. So one of the things that I really like about Missouri, aside from its gorgeous, just natural landscape in the state parks, it's full of fun things to do, both for adults and kids. The people are just salt of the earth. They're really nice people. You have no problem walking up, having a conversation, getting to know people. I mean, this is one of the few places I've lived where I know every neighbor on my street. We have parties, we have celebrations. We used to have this huge 4th of July bonanza where our neighbor would put on a better fireworks display than any professional company I've ever seen. I kid you not. It was but just really nice people. I think that goes a long way. There's a lot of fun stuff to do, a lot of good food experiences to try. And it's very diverse depending on where in the state you go. I mean, you'll get a completely different experience going into southern Missouri than western Missouri than eastern Missouri.
Nice. Excellent. Well, Jeremy, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with us. I really appreciate it. For my students that are out there, if you have any questions about whether it's Missouri or anything else, you can certainly send me questions or comments to scott@theprofessortravel.com. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to be notified when new videos go up, hit the bell icon right above us in order to be able to be notified about that. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And if you like this content and you want to see more of it, click the like button in order to be able to do that. But finally, for those who are listening on the podcast, and especially those who have never done so before, please rate us. Let us know what you think. We really appreciate it. Until next time, however, make every day a travel adventure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.